All right, everybody, we got a special one today. Joining me is the wonderful Liv Kissper. She is a mentor, guide, best-selling author, and an overall great person. She trains people to collapse the deceptive timelines, protecting the false self-image, keeping them in a never-ending search for perfectionism, endless healing, self-doubt, and effort. As a result, they experience mental clarity, love, and freedom they never imagined possible. She also just published her new book, How to Achieve Nothing. It's like a practical integration manual for this whole non-dual perspective that one may find themselves in. Highly recommend it. I highly recommend all of Liv's work. Like I said, she's a great person, beautiful soul, inside and out. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Liv Kissper. Getting this thing started, other than your book, you're involved with a lot of creation, whether it's like, guided meditations. You did ASMR, just giving us monologues, whatever it is, you have a creative knack, right? So where does this all come from?
Who knows? It's just one of these things. I've been always really creative in my life. And right now, actually, I'm very involved in the past year in the theater improvisation here in Costa Rica. So I always feel like just creating something, feeling inspired, getting into the zone of just when I feel like inspired and something wants to come up. It's just like super, it's what's just happens.
Yeah.
Can't stop it.
Mm-hmm. Does it bring you a sense of fulfillment?
No, it's one of these things where I've been observing this from the past as well, and how sometimes this creative energy can also come from achieving, and it gives you a lot of like these dopamine spikes. Like it gives you like what you can call fulfillment. But then when you don't feel creative, you can also go feeling like you're not doing enough, or there's just, there's no point of doing anything. So nowadays I'm in a space where just whatever happens. And I don't try to label it or don't, it's just fulfillment. It's just such a word because it implies that you don't feel fulfilled without it.
That's true. Yeah. So what word would you use? Just like not even a word? You just going with the flow? Whatever, you're just dancing with the moment?
Yeah, exactly. Just whatever wants to happen naturally, and if that happens, it's the most beautiful thing. At the moment the mind comes or the story comes and tells you like you shouldn't be doing that, or you should be doing something differently, then the natural flow is just like stopped, or there's just like some sort of stuckness there. So whatever needs to come, and sometimes it's nothing that needs to come, whatever that looks like. So it's all just part of what is, what happens.
Yeah. It's interesting though, and I've noticed this pattern in others as well, and in myself, that once you tap into this natural flow and tapping into what is, from that comes a sense of creation, right? And one would think that tapping into what is just like, how do I phrase this? When you phrase like it is, it just is. Life just is. It's the moment. Just be in the moment. One may assume that is just like a sense of almost inactivity, like you're sitting on the couch, not doing anything, watching Netflix, just being in the moment, man. But it's actually, from what I find, quite the opposite. Like there's a sense of action that comes from that being in the present moment. And I think that's our natural state. In a way, we are creators. I think a human being is a creator. So it's like tapping into what is it's tapping into our sense of creation just innately. I think we all have it personally. And whether you're creating, theater, you're writing a book, or you're, painting a picture, or whatever the creative aspect is. I think it's like we all have that within us. Would you say the same? Like, do you think just being a human being in a way is a creative spirit?
If you believe yourself to be a human being, the whole non-duality, where this is whole coming, my book and what I do right now, it's about there is nobody that does anything. That achiever or the doer, it's all just a thought that takes the credit, that takes the, it's like afterthought that tells you like, oh, I'm doing this, I do this. But it's just something that happens, just like your heart is beating by itself, and you don't have to like really do it or take credit for it. It just happens. So totally, it's just spontaneity. It's just this magical creation that's just constantly unfolding. And
yeah, it's like creativity comes from spontaneity, and it's almost like that's like an archetype for the universe. If you want to believe in the Big Bang, it's just like the spontaneous creation, and here we are, just some kind of happening. Just energy in motion, right? So you can take that grand metaphor and almost apply it to one's life in the sense of creation. It's just like when it happens, it happens. It's just like when creativity just flows. It's hard to explain, but I think if one is a creator, they kind of know what I'm talking about right now. It's going with that flow of motion that came from the Big Bang. This sense of energy that is this sense of like motion, kinetic energy that's happening. It's creation, creating alongside the creation, I believe. But yeah. So for your book, right? Why did you write that? Like, where did that creation come from? Where did the spark of writing come from in you? Is it just sat down at the computer and started typing? Was there any pre-planning behind it, or is it just kind of like a channeling in a way?
No, it's been a process for 7 years, when I was just gathering ideas and
Wow.
and things, and it was moving and changing, and it's just it never really took any shape until last year, when it started like taking this shape, and I just really wanted this to come out, because I was always super interested in spirituality, self-development, being on the journey, being on the path of improving myself and trying to achieve, and also business, trying to achieve something and create something. And so putting these things together, I just found it extremely fascinating. And plus, I've read so many spiritual books out there, and participated in so many business courses and marketing courses and copyright, all kinds of stuff. And then coaching clients from there. And I always thought like there must be like, if there was like this fusion, but nobody talks about it, nobody writes about it. Maybe there is like 1 or 2 books ever that I've read that kind of put non-duality and business together, and just like mind blowing. And I always wanted to create something as well. And so in this book, I particularly just focused on time, on one aspect, because first it was this big book, it was about everything, and I kind of cut it into half. So this one is specifically about the illusion of time, and what it means, and the second one is going to be more about the illusion of the self.
Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, so let's get into that. How would you describe the illusion of time? So you made a book about time, but time doesn't exist, and how it actually applies in a realistic sense. So how could you describe that for us?
Yeah, so everyone that I work with, or everyone pretty much, always feels that they feel busy, they don't have enough time, there is too much to do and not enough time to do it. And so this is like this mantra that we live with, like not enough time, too much to do. So that's why I focus on time. And really, so this whole book is a deep inquiry. It's really, I'm not just giving some advice or something what I've read, or not even research. It's just inquiry. It just takes you into really looking what you can discover when you take all of these ideas you have about time, just when they disappear, what you're left with is just this, which is timeless. But the time is undeniable. It's just a story. And it's a story about a better experience in the future. So it's this pull that constantly make us this achieving only happens in mind, by the way. It's nothing that happens here. The achieving just happens. Is the overthinking, is the strategizing and constantly trying to come up with something and create something other than what is, or other than what actually happens in reality. We try to create these visions and have these goals for the future. And when we believe that these goals are possible for us, like we feel very inspired, this energy. But then when this whole this world of expectations or how things should be, it basically creates this fantasy world about how much we should be achieving, how much money we should be making, all these things. When that doesn't happen, like we feel depressed or we feel disappointed, or it's just this contraction as if something was wrong. And when we are in this contraction, we miss this magic or this unexpected beauty or things that are available to us now. When we just cannot see it when the fantasy overrides the reality.
Mm-hmm. And thus from that actually inhibits our future, right? So the more that we're actually worrying about the future and creating some kind of expectation or narrative about the future, it ruins the now, and that actually ruins the future. So you're better off just like being the most present here and when you're here, not actually creating for some kind of fantasy future, right?
I think in the core of the book, there's this short formula, which is very simple, but it's not always easy to do, because really you have to do it without the mind, without the head. You just have to look at what is and really investigate. But it basically helps you to look what your expectation is and what is your hope for the future. And if you stay really still, you're able, in time of when you feel stressed or contracted, you're able to really see what that expectation is and what that hope is for the future. So you're running fast to get to that hope. But the formula shows you that you can just reverse those two. And when you reverse them, it just shows you this unexpected step or unexpected action that you can take right now as a next step. And when you know what it is, the stress just disappears. So it shows you that the timeline or the story that we have in our heads about achieving is just completely deceptive. And saying that, there's nothing wrong with setting goals or visualize things or imagine the future. There's nothing wrong with that. It's really just when we feel stressed or when we feel contracted inside. Because I used to be such an achiever, and I would just run with all these contractions, and I would have coaches, and they're like, "Go for it, like just do it, and I'll be running, and I would feel so contracted. And now when I feel that contraction, I just like stop and I look what's behind it, and I'm committed not to create anything from within stress, because I know that anything that's created from stress, it just leads to more stress in the future, even though it gives you some results on the way. It can appear that, wow, you achieved this, or suddenly you make more money, or you got the marriage, or whatever you wanted. But in the long term, it will always lead to more stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it probably leads to a different outcome than what your original hope was when you create from stress. Yeah. Yeah,
the reality is hopeless. There is no hope. Once you get into really seeing what is, and the person who lives in the timeline cannot see the reality. People talk about reality, but it's the opposite. It's just a thought. It's what we think reality is. So once the timeline is collapsed, then what appears or what is recognized that is there, it's just very unexpected.
Unexpected.
The expectations, like right now, you have expectations about this and this moment. The reason why you feel like relaxed here is because you believe that nobody's gonna stab you from behind, or there's a whole world of expectations. There's a whole world of expectations that we have about any moment, and it's the expectation that really defines whether you feel happy or unhappy in any moment. It has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah. So expectations really never serve us. It's like just expect the unexpected. But don't even don't even do that. I don't know. Just like it's almost like, yeah, like why? So it's still gonna pop up though. Like the mind's still gonna play its game with expectations, but it's almost like what we do in the moment with that happening. It's like first we got to notice the expectations, the hopes, the narratives, the storyline of our life. So first, like notice that, and then you can start to play the game of like the time reversal formula, and you can kind of like switch it around a little bit and change the narrative a little.
It's not about changing the narrative. It's really about collapsing the story. And when I work on one-on-one clients, we go in so much depth using different forms of inquiries, and especially I love focusing on the self-image, which is in a way the same as the story or the same as time, because what happens to the character is, the story is what happens to the character, to the self, and it always happens in time. And when that is collapsed, then it's just being recognized that the self was never real and the time was never real and the story never was. It never happened. And you're left with reality, and the reality is very unexpected, is not what you would expect. And suddenly all these things are just available, or suddenly you remember, like suddenly you see all these things where these gratitudes come up, or you feel spacious and this freedom, where before there was so much contracted energy and we believed 100% that something really bad is happening and it's going to have a really bad outcome in the future, because we always projected in the future what it means about me, and in the future I'm gonna feel alone and I'm gonna die alone and I'm gonna be broke. So without that, you're just left with what is, and in that it's just unexpected availability. It's just such magical spaciousness and freedom.
Beauty, unexpected beauty, to say the least. Where do you think this comes from? Where do you think like these contractions and horrible ideations of the future come from in our being? Why not? I don't know. It's almost like by default, a human mind is negative and retrogressive for our own good, if that makes sense. Like there's something, like there's inertia in the mind. So where do you think that stems from?
The mind, the mind is always a controller. It tries to convince you about a story that is not true. That's its job. And I'm going deeper with that in the book, but it's the ultimate fear is the fear of dying, because the self lives in timeline, and there is this imaginary deadline at the end. And it's very aware of it. So it will do anything to transcend the deadline, to do anything to live longer, to live forever. So it's very interested in purpose and your mission you have, because it wants to leave some legacy. It wants to be remembered. It wants to just, people get into groups that have some meanings, and, even terrorist attacks can be explained in just looking into how people just want to, this death transcendence, like your community, you're doing something so good for what you believe that's gonna be remembered, and you're just doing something that's much larger than the self.
Yeah.
And that all leads to all the conflict and all the stereotyping, and it creates entertaining stories. And I don't think that mind is always negative. It can be positive. There's actually a lot of things that, but it's just a story. It's like I can be believing how, there's a lot of people who can be in denial, that it's just like, it just doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. The main part of the story is that it's always duality. There is always good and bad. It's always worse and better, more and less, always inferior or superior. You will always feel either a victim or you will feel like arrogant. In the story, there's always this duality. But in reality, there isn't.
So the true story is the story of no story, the story of what is and what isn't. It's not even a story. It's just like, just here and now. It's just
right.
That. But the phenomena of life still goes on. The happening. There's still, from what I feel, I don't know if you feel it, but there's still something happening here. In this, I feel like I'm in my body. You feel like you're in yours, and the listener feels like they're in theirs, wherever they are. Right? We have this like temporary vantage point. And within that temporary vantage point, the story goes on. The movie of our life goes on. The show goes on, right? But it's like within that duality, it's like don't get stuck on just the story, right? Because there's still the mind happenings, I guess. But it's like once you believe you're the mind happenings, once you believe you're the egotistical tendencies, that's when the resistance starts. You know, that's when you kind of like, that's when the story gets bad in a way. That's the irony of it. And that's when suffering ensues, right? Would you say? Is that when one believes the stories to be true, then you lose you lose the moment, you lose the point of life in a way. It's hard to explain. We're getting into like territory that's
I totally get you. I totally get you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say the same, that once you confuse the what isn't with what is, or, once you confuse the story for reality, then that's where suffering happens.
Yeah. And like you said, the ultimate story that we tell ourselves is the story of our demise, is that we're here, we're important, we want to leave a legacy. But there's something in us that wants to live forever. So we do these things, we go to these lengths, people build statues of themselves, or they, whatever it is, we just naturally have this inclination to live forever in this story, in this image, right? But would you say truly getting the sense of immortality and living forever is actually being able to see what reality really is? Does it touch upon that? And almost in a state where it's like birthless and deathless. And that is like the true sense of that immortality in a way, almost deathless in a way. It's birthless and deathless. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be recognized when we look without the story.
Exactly.
When you look without the story, because the story is always that you are this entity somehow being put in this body, and everything is, so it implies the world is outside, you're in here, and you're coming from somewhere, you were born and you had this journey and you're going somewhere and your purpose is this and you have to do that. But when you really look without this story, it's just so simple that it's really hard to believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just this, and that's it. It's just such a simple magic that cannot be explained by anything. It cannot be even described. The more you talk about it, the more it's just. But you just look, and it's obvious that it's this. What is reality, as I call reality. Ultimately, this whole thing is a dream, but. There's definitely, I like to see the distinction between reality, what is and what isn't, and then the appearance in our minds. Even if I ask you, like, so, where you were born, or like the house where you grew up, and you're thinking about the house or the home where you were growing up, and you see this image in your mind.
Yep.
And it's just an image.
Mm-hmm.
And thought can tell you anything. So now there's a story about you, and it all just happens in the mind, that you were born and you're, this journey, and you got to this point, and this is who you are, and now you're going somewhere. But that coming and going just happens in the mind.
Yeah.
And and what is just like, you have to, there is not even you. There's no separation between what is and between you and reality. It's another belief that there is a separation. There is space. There is time. It just appears. It's very convincing, of course. Like, this illusion has to look convincing. It has to convince us into believing that we are this entity, and we feel so helpless because the world is so big, and there is just we were born and we're gonna die. It's just such a fear. We don't know what to do with that. So we find these different coping, ways how to cope with the fear of death.
Yeah.
How to manage the fear.
Yeah. So it's almost like Almost. Like there has to be a sense of duality. Even though at the deepest and highest level there is non-dual, there's no separation between me and you. We're just
there is no me and you.
Yeah, exactly. At the ultimate level, there's no me and you. But there kind of is right now.
It appears. Yeah, it appears that you are over there and I'm like over here. Yeah.
And the listener appears that they're the listener. So it's like there's this apparent surface level appearance happening going on. But ultimately, behind the scenes, it's really all one. The oneness.
I wouldn't say it's behind the scenes. That oneness is the reality, is the obviousness. If you really looked without the story, it become obvious. But the story tells you that you are in this body and I'm in this body, and there's a space between of us. It's just like, you know, when you look at like a really beautiful painting of a painter who is like a master painter, and he makes the landscape and the space appearing that something is very far away, and the close objects are really like sharp, and so you really look at the picture and you go like, wow, that looks amazing. Like, but you know, it's a 2D. There is no space between the very first thing and you know, the mountain in the distance. There is no space. It just appears that way.
Yeah.
So it's the same here. We believe it. It's a belief that it's a separation. But once we put all of these questions into deep inquiry, we're left with the reality, which is unexpected, and there's no separation, and there is no time.
Which means we're all essentially the same thing.
Right? Well, there is no all. There is just that same thing. And it's not a thing. It's just like magical. There's this thing that cannot be described. Just this appearance, this isness.
Would you describe magic it with the word love?
You can name it whatever you want.
I like to use the
word love. But it's true. It's when the stories and when the self-image is collapsed, or, you know, recognized that it's never been there in the first place, there is always this sense of love and spaciousness and connection and just freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing to do about it. You know, the mind kind of just like stops, because it doesn't show you the pictures or the movies about how the future should look like, because we always have an idea about how it should look like, just so we feel safe and, you know, we survive, and then we survive after death. So there's always these ideas, but once those ideas are not there, when they're collapsed, or recognized, they're just nothings, you're left with just this.
Just this.
And there is just, you know, this conversation happening.
Yeah. It's pretty magical. It's pretty magical. You know, I get to, in conversations with like this and with people, and we get to this point in the conversation, and I'm left wordless. I'm left speechless. I don't really know what else to say, because there's really nothing to say. I mean, we're glossing over the fact of the isness as much as we can. Like, there's no word that could describe any of this, what we're really speaking about. So it's essentially, we're just playing a game. This is just kind of like we're having some fun here in a way, you know. I don't know.
It's entertaining. It's this cosmic joke. We're trying to talk about something but there's definitely ways of not describing it, but pointing towards it.
Yeah.
Because we can just look, and when we look without the perceived, you know, the knowledge or the theories or the concepts, the ideas, what we have about what reality should look like, or, you know, what should happen once you get enlightened. You know, when you look without that, without all these ideas, you'll be just left with that, with this.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment for you? And I know there's no you. From how we're speaking right now, was there?
Yeah.
Because you said you went through a a journey, right? You went through this spiritual odyssey where you just went on this self-search, which I think a lot of us can relate to. So was there something that clicked in you and said, wait a second, what am I searching for? What am I really yearning for? Was there just something that clicked for you?
What do you mean click? Like, have I arrived to the final destination, or what is it? What was I looking for?
Yeah. Was there a moment when you were saying, what was I looking for the whole time? Because I think that's kind of in a way.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every time when reality is recognized for what it is, when the self-image is collapsed or recognized as never being there in the first place, it's just obvious that this is what I've been always looking for. This is what I was trying always to achieve.
Do you remember like a moment, like an epiphany that hit you? And you're like,
oh, it's just continuously so many. It's, for me, it's this liberation of self-recognition or self-realization, truth, or whatever you want to call it. Even though I would say truth is the not knowing, it doesn't happen like in a linear time as we are taught. It doesn't happen as, okay, so I was on this journey and I used to be completely unconscious and something was wrong with me and I had so many blocks and stuff. And then something happened and I got enlightened and now I'm free and there's just like, I'm nobody and everything is great. So there's a story. How would I describe it is that in my story, because it's both at the same time. It's so hard to describe.
Yeah.
It's what is and what isn't is one. There is no separation. So if I could just say it very normal words as speaking to a friend, I would say every time when I have contraction, when I feel there's a contraction, I do an inquiry and on the self-image and see when that is collapsed, I just recognize what reality is, and that feels every time like a liberation. And over time, it really feels like there's so many things that I just feel free. And I used to have so many triggers, and I would be like hiding and pretending, and it can still happen sometimes. But now I know that when that happens, that contraction happens, there's nothing to run away from. I'm 100% committed. I just want to go deeper into it because there's this new pocket of liberation, like, coming back even more into my true nature. So, and it's not even a practice. I couldn't describe it as a practice because before I had so many practices, different meditations, and even meditation is trying to achieve something, this final mind expansion and liberation. And, we get to the point eventually when we feel peaceful all the time, this lasting undisturbance. And so that's the part of the illusion. That's the part of the dream.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so as this, I would say that this is not a practice, collapsing the timeline or the self-image, because I don't know if that's going to happen or not. If it happens, I would do the process. If it doesn't happen, then it's just let's roll with it.
Mm-hmm. So is that what you would say to somebody, hypothetically, and people probably have approached you, but hypothetically, somebody approaches you with sincerity and says, hey, I want what you got, even though I know there's nothing to get, right? But hypothetically, someone's like, hey, I just love your energy. I want what you, like, how do I get to where you are mentally? Is that kind of like what you just said? Is that what you would tell them?
Well, I would guide them personally to see, they would come up with some sort of whatever's going on in their life, some sort of stressful situation.
Yeah.
And we would see what is that self-image. It's always the controller. It's always the convincer that tries to convince you about something else that's not true. And once that's collapsed, it's just that there's the freedom that just comes.
I see. Yeah. So what would you say to this person, right? We'll get back on this topic. I'm afraid I'm afraid I don't want to get old. Like, I don't want to die. It's just the future seems bleak. So if someone has a constriction like that, how would you guide somebody through that?
Well, first, I wouldn't guide everybody because it almost sounds like they will be looking for some advice, and I don't give advice. It's just not. It's also the whole book. The point in the book is there's nothing or nobody to be helped, because you cannot be helped to be who you already are. So I never look at people as somebody, oh no, they are in a, oh shit, they are in a bad spot right now. They have these bad beliefs. I never look at them like that. I don't see any difference. Like that's not who they are. It's just a story that what they believe. And it really depends how much they're committed for the liberation, how much they're committed to see the truth. When I say the truth, really people can misinterpret it as like, oh, it's your truth. It's really just getting into that not knowing mind. And we are so invested into the knowing, into that inner knowing. We know how things should be. So if you approach a person like that who is not committed to know what the truth is, or who's not committed to the liberation, most people are committed to feeling better. They just want to feel better. And that's just this whole toxic world of self-improvement, like just to feel better. And I get it. Sometimes we just want to feel better, but it's just ongoingly, just you feel better, and it just oscillates between duality, you feel better and worse, better and worse. With this, once you're committed and you're really ready to be guided to see, because there's also some benefits that we're holding on to be in that story, to believing those things. Those are some big benefits. So giving up those benefits, it's hard. It's deep work. It's not just something that you can just.
Yeah.
So for me, I always check for if the person is ready for it or committed.
I understand. Yeah, it's circumstantial. Depends on the person. Depends on the situation. I understand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, in terms of, you described in your book you did Iboga, right?
Iboga, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what are the benefits to the story with that? Was there something? Yeah, could you get into that? Was it a very significant experience for you?
Yeah, for me, it was the catalyst. Like it was the first time, because up until that point, I was on this self-improvement journey where I believe, there's me in here and I have to do something, and I just have to constantly be improving myself. And whether I was in a relationship or in a business, like it was just never enough. And I was just working so hard on myself. I was just trying so hard, and I was struggling so hard, even though sometimes for long periods of time, I was getting these huge results. I would get into these relationships, or I would get money, and, I would feel so happy and blissful for a long time. But it was never lasting, oscillating between those stages that I described, stages of success I'm describing in the book as well. So for me, the Iboga was just where I saw, it was just become so obvious that the time was illusory. It was just a story in my head. It showed me almost like in a visual representation, because I'm very visual, that the now is just what is, and the past and future was just dripping down, and all the questions I had in my head, they were just answered quickly. And I think that it's exactly what anyone can just see with the deep inquiry if they really read the book, which takes them into that space. But not everybody will believe that. If you tell someone time is just a story or illusion, like people say these things, but they don't really know. But for me, maybe because I was so highly altered, like I just was like, holy shit. Like it was just like, so like, oh, it was just such obvious thing. It just became like, I don't think I would believe it before. And it was just, I just saw it.
Wow.
And it was so simple. It was just so simple, really. There was just nothing, like no big. And after that, I've been always, or even before, but I've been always like resonating with guides and teachers they wouldn't call themselves non-dual, but definitely they were very non-dual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, and now it all just made sense. And so I was collecting all these inquiries and trying to, and starting to question everything, especially all the teachings I've been taught around spirituality. And my background is like in science, and I was always interested in science and spirituality. And so I started questioning everything.
So it seems to me that was the spark for you. And like you said you wouldn't believe it. But in that
Yeah, I
moment,
wouldn't
that
believe.
experience, like you believed it, right? There was no going around that. It
Well,
was
I believe
probably,
that the time is real, and that I was born and I'm gonna die, and there was nothing, nobody could tell me otherwise. I'm like, of course, like this is me here, and time is real. Like, look, this is what happened yesterday, and tomorrow, there's tomorrow for sure. Like, it's so unthinkable for the person to, because yeah, the person lives in a timeline, in a story. But you are not that person.
Nope, we're not that person. Thankfully.
So, but it's entertaining, like when I do
Yeah.
theater, what I really love about being in a theater is just like being on the stage and just like going into all kinds of different emotions. There is just like this, once you don't take it personally and you still go through these emotions and, desperation and like anxiety and who knows what, like there is this weird enjoyment. It's only, it's only when you take it, or just like when you're watching a movie. You don't want to just watch a movie. Like, can you imagine just watching non-dual movie that has just one scene, like just nothing? Like, you want to watch the whole thing and you want to go through like feeling scared and feeling, like people watch all kinds of weird things online, because there's this weird enjoyment that until it happens for you. If it's not happening for you, this is weird enjoyment. But when it's happening to you, then obviously you make it mean something about you. And it's never happening to you at the first place, but it's just a belief that it's happening to you and that it's going to mean something really bad, a bad outcome for you in the future. But you can never really know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, well said. Yeah, so I mean, it can lead one, it seems, to more of a enjoyment out of this life, out of this experience. I like how you said it's like entertainment. This is God's play in a way, and that's what it seems like.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just want to get into this. They have this dream of getting into this non-dual state and just being there all the time, forever, and never be disturbed. And that's the part of the dream.
Yeah, that's missing the point. That's almost trapping oneself in duality right there. That's like the final trap. It doesn't even make any sense. Yeah. No, it's not. That's not like that. Like, I like the metaphor of the movie. If you were to watch a non-dual movie, it would just be a white screen or a black screen.
Yep.
No one wants to
One
watch that
flash
movie.
and not even that. You wouldn't even. There will be no experience.
Yeah.
The only way how you can experience anything is through the story.
Yeah.
Without having this timeline that tells you what this is, you wouldn't be able to say what this is. Like you wouldn't know who I am. You wouldn't know what the phone is or what the microphone is.
Yeah. And then you can create alongside the story, right? Not even you, but there is this, it's almost like one becomes the story, one merges with the story. And there's no separation between the writer and the actor. It almost becomes one, if that makes sense.
Well, there's never been any separation.
Yeah. It never will be.
But it appears there is. So we can stay tricked. So we can stay experiencing.
Damn. This is good. If it's hypothetically, I mean, not hypothetically, I'm going to ask you right now, how would you describe God? Is there a place for God in your life? Like a word, what does that resonate for you in your being?
Yeah, there used to be so many different abstract things, and I don't know. It's just what is. I feel like truth. When I really get into truth, it's really this not knowing mind. But God as something as everything. So that would be reality. Is this unexpected reality? When I say reality, people again imagine it's the story, but it's the unexpected. It's all that is, and it includes what isn't. Without any separation. And you can call it you, the real you, because there is no separation between anything. It's just very simple. I usually don't use those words because it's confusing. Every time you say these words, people they can't help but imagine something, abstract words. I like very literal things, talking about things that you can describe or point to. But reality, I would call it reality.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're saying. There's better words to use that are pointing and guiding others to that sense that we're kind of getting at. And God is a little counterintuitive, especially since it's a weighted word. And it has been.
It is. And it's so abstract. It's so abstract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It always implies there's some sort of big force behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And it excludes this. It's anything but reality. Most people will believe that God is anything but reality.
Very true.
That this reality is somehow limited, and there is something way bigger beyond it, but you have no access to it. And so we have to strive and achieve and search, and there's the searching journey, like to find it.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing to find. I would wager that the original meaning of God from scriptures or in sutras, or when people first started using it, it was probably closer to the essence and guiding ones to the essence that we're kind of getting at right now, rather than like this guy in the, this bearded man, the archetype of the god in Abrahamic religions of the god, or the bearded man in the sky with his puppet strings that you have to bow down to like an outward idol. I think that's just a distortion on the word. And that's why it's kind of been convoluted for us. There's too many like meanings to the word, to the symbol of that word. But I think the original, like what the masters, quote unquote, were getting at, is the essence of what is and what isn't, and this timeless nature, and the isness. That's the true sense of that non-duality that we're getting at. I really think that's the OG meaning, but it's just been, it's been convoluted, like I said, over thousands of years. Yeah. But ultimately, I think God is love. That's what I'll throw that one out there. I think there's no higher energy than that, and that's what we are, and that's what we aren't. It's hard to explain. Yeah, we're getting into the territory of no words again. But yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. Do you have anything else you want to say? Maybe what are your plans for the future? What are you hoping to get into? Or are you just kind of going?
What am I hoping to achieve in the future?
Yeah. What are your expectations?
I have no idea. It's just whenever I get to the place where there's this, it's just a feeling like what's next. It's almost like a curiosity. And every time I have these ideas about what should happen, it's just, this comes with this striving energy. And I find it so, and sometimes it still appears, by the way. It's not like, oh, it's never there. I've stopped with achieving. It comes sometimes. And so I just look for the truth and get into the not knowing. And what's there is just this curiosity. And that's just like with the movie example, like the reason why you like watching movies is because you don't know what happens next. You're like in this, like, it's this curious, it's like this, I don't know what's happening. But like some people would watch movies and they go like, oh no, like, oh, they shouldn't have done that, that's wrong, and you really you don't really enjoy the movie. There's like suffering almost, or just like try to, like really bad movies, for example. If the movie is really good, like there's just this like, what's next? It's just curiosity and really not knowing. And when you're open like that, like these unexpected things just come, because I'm coming from a place, in my story, who studied deeply, law of attraction and manifestation. I was always like created and tried to manifest and did all kinds of different like techniques and, infusing it with my feelings and visualizing and meditating with like really focused mantras and stuff. And as I'm saying, like it appears that can bring some results, but it's never reliable. It's just keeping you in that story that you have this power as itself. You have this agency, and you are the one who has to do something to change what's wrong, because there's always this sense of something's wrong. So it's just so liberating to get to space. And again, it's not even getting there. It's just being in that space of realizing that you never were anywhere else. Space of just this curiosity, what happens next, like not knowing anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's a big, but not knowing from a not knowing from a space like, oh, I don't know, but I should know, because the thought tells you like, oh, but you should be knowing. It's I don't know, and I don't need to know, because there's nothing else. It's like this blank emptiness, and really there is just like, just have no idea what will happen next, and I don't need to know.
Exactly. I like that. Yeah.
And just
like
following the simple directions, what reality shows me, do this, or just like, it's just happening spontaneously. Someone like you just asks me for an interview, so yes, like it's a yes, so we have a chat.
Here we are. Yeah.
Here we are.
Spontaneous creation. Yeah, I like that. From a sense of wonder, from a sense of not knowing, and it's like being okay with not knowing. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Because you can try, some people tell me like, oh, how to achieve nothing, and they get angry almost. Like a lot of people get triggered when they read the book, because they, we're so attached to achieving. Like without achieving, we think that we would die. Nothing will get done. And we would just like stay at home, lie on the couch. We wouldn't move a finger. But that's just not what it is. I mean, you can try. You can try to just like not do anything. Like soon, like you'll be moved. Soon you stand up, or a thought tells you like, hey, I'm hungry, let's have pizza, or let's create something. Like, there's just like, but you never know what your next thought is going to be. It's just like this spontaneous appearance. You can never predict it. You can never, you never know. And then there's this whole bunch of unexpectedness, that just happen.
Yep.
That you can never predict.
Yep.
These conversations, what you hear, and so just following those little simple directions, just like this leads to, and just kind of like just being moved.
Being moved, I like that. Being played like an instrument. Not played, like being fooled. You're just kind of like, yeah.
But again, it kind of implies, it implies duality. There is something moving me, but there is no separation between, there's no something and there is no me. It's just movement, really. Just like this, it's just speech happening. Like I'm not doing it. Like if I was doing it, I would know what I'm gonna say next. I have no idea. Like it's just so magical to realize that just everything, just like your heart is beating spontaneously, and you don't have to do anything about it. And what you say is also happening spontaneously. Just like the birds are singing spontaneously, and just one spontaneity appearing. And then, of course, there comes a thought that takes a credit for it.
Of course. Well.
Me, I did it. Oh, I did an interview today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely going to pop up for sure. But I'm glad that we did this interview today. I'm glad we shared this time together. This was definitely a deep dive. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your wisdom. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Did you say plug?
Yeah, like anything you want to advertise?
Right.
Sorry,
okay.
Is that an American thing? Plug?
Maybe. Yeah. I know. I'm just.
Sorry.
We spoke about my book. So if anyone wants to read more about, they feel stressed or they feel like there's never enough time, they want to go deeper into the inquiry of time and see the formula, how simple it is to just see how the timeline is deceptive. It's called How to Achieve Nothing. 3-step time reversal formula to end stress, overthinking, and the strategizing mania. It's available on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll link everything down below. I appreciate your time, Olivia. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great questions and great looking, your curiosity and openness to really be able or open to just look at things that are maybe a little radical, maybe a little weird, but that's clearly what you're interested in. So thank you so much.
I'm into the radical and the weird people. That's what I want.
Okay, great. Oh, awesome.
But yeah, weird in a good way. Not like, there's good weird and there's bad weird. I like good weird. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, appreciate your time. Wish you all the best. Peace out.